45% of women ages 25 to 44 are expected to be single and child-free.
Having kids in general is already a high risk. And now that we have these laws in place, the laws does not benefit the woman.
There's a landmine now, and it's so many ways. You almost have to know you're with the right person before you proceed.
Men are kind of opting out as well.
45% is a high number. "45% of women ages 25 to 44, let me make sure I got this correct, are expected to be single and child-free." Now, I don't know about y'all. We hear statistics all the time, and maybe it doesn't mean anything, but I'm like, 45% of women 25 to 44, which, if I'm not doing my math, is some really prime childbearing years, right? And relationship building. Because it says not only just child-free, but single and child-free. Am I the only one thinking that we need to raise the alarm if these numbers are true, if there's some credibility to this statistic? Because we're in 2026, right? Am I lying? Am I tripping? Because I'm like, holy shit. Oh no, 2025, I'm sorry. We're in 2025, but we damn near about to be in 2026. So this is like literally, 5 years, right? 4 or 5 years from now. What are y'all thoughts about the statistic? Is it reasonable to say, hey, there could be some truth here? And if so, what does that mean? Ring the alarm or no?
All I got to say is thank God for Nick Cannon. Nick, we see you. Thank you for your work, for what you do for the community on the front lines. You know what I'm saying?
One pump at a time.
One pump at it, whatever it takes, bro. Whatever it takes, one pump at a time.
I don't know. I think NBA YoungBoy, is that who it is, who's giving him a run for his money? You know, having 3 baby mamas all pregnant at the same time and already have his own litter of kids, so to speak. So he might got some competition there. And I think Camp's not too far behind with his 8 kids too. So I don't know. But to answer the question, I think that unfortunately the alarm has already been raised, because I believe that was one of the reasons why they pulled back on Roe versus Wade. They pulled back the whole emphasizing the abortion and so forth, as far as the laws restricting abortion access, criminalizing women who are pregnant. And so I think the alarm was already raised. And I honestly believe this is the reaction to the alarm that was raised for the regulation purposes of the woman's body. And so I was on the internet doing some research and so forth, and a lot of women were saying, hey, that's what I do. But a lot of women were actually saying that they don't want to have kids because the economy sucks. They was like, and they don't even want to get pregnant, because if they get pregnant, anything go wrong, they could be criminalized for having a miscarriage, or they can die because the doctors will no longer perform in certain states DNC abortions to clean out the miscarriage. And so for them, they're valuing their life. They're like, what's the return on investment if we were to get pregnant, if we were to have children, in regards to this economy, right? And also with the rise of school shootings in the U.S., I'm assuming the study was for the U.S. for the most part. With the rise of school shootings and the instability in the world itself, it was like, it's too much of a risk. And a lot of women are opting out because part of it is a rebellion. But another part of it is that they're looking at their parents and seeing how their parents are somewhat struggling, especially for women. But I also think it's a reaction to the fact that men are kind of opting out as well, right? So there's already stats that show that men would rather be single, pay for services, and they already have X amount of men that are child-free themselves. And so I think it's just a mirror reflection of that as well. I think that ultimately women in general are saying, hey, we have our own community, because there's an island out there that now have this all female island. Everybody is a woman that does this and does that and do that. And I think we might see a rise of some of that type of stuff that's occurring in the community, not necessarily in the U.S., but I honestly believe that this is a reaction to the laws and stuff that was put in place because somebody else had already raised the alarm. Somebody else already saw that this was coming down the pipe in regards to the population. Like, for example, I think it's down to 1.6 children and depending on the ethnicity, though, so I will acknowledge that. And so I think the alarm was already raised, and now, unfortunately, it's having the opposite effect of what they thought it was going to have, because whenever you force people to do something, especially women, we automatically somewhat want to rebel. People in general.
Well, no, because I just want to clarify whether or not were you saying that this was a reaction to like the recent change with like abortion in America or the U.S.? Is that kind of where you're going with that conversation?
So I'm saying I think that's part of it. I think that the laws that were put in place pretty much guaranteed that women decide to opt out, or some women were decided to opt out because it's no longer safe. Having kids in general is already a high risk for women in general, right? But we don't look at it that way because we have women who have births all the time, but not recognizing that it's still a high risk. And now that we have these laws in place, the laws does not benefit the woman in the sense that if she does have a miscarriage, or if she does have or she's in the process of giving birth, the laws restricted doctors from doing what they need to do to save the woman, is what I'm saying. So yes, I think that's part of it, but that's not the sole reason.
I think there's a lot. It's like a perfect storm of a few things. I think SM is completely right that men have kind of checked out of some parts of the conversation. They've been asking what's in it for me. I think you have people like I don't want to name any names, but some people they were like, hey, I'm gonna get to be 40 or 50, and then I'll just buy a kid, or I'll get artificially inseminated, or I'll do whatever. So that track of family and the things that you do that we talked about previously, like doing it starting young, that gets kind of wiped out. So I think it's kind of like how people are all into being all these other different professions that have come around. Now there are new industries, new economies. There's also new ways of thinking about family and thinking about how you're going to get that family. So I think people just shifted. They now think they don't have to do those steps. Guys aren't as interested in making the family because it kind of locks them in, and the women aren't that concerned because they get with a guy, he might want a kid, and she's got to argue with that. If she has a child that she can't get an abortion, she got to deal with that. She might even want to have the child. Maybe they're supposed to be user protection and do the trip. So I mean, there's a landmine now, and it's so many ways. You almost have to know you're with the right person before you proceed, and it's so hard to know now you're with the right person. I hope they fix this, and the reason why, and I'll say this because it is alarming. There is such a thing as a tipping point. There is such a thing as a point at which the birth rate it becomes insufficient to keep going. In other words, you're going to end up with fewer and fewer people because you just don't have enough people to keep growing, to keep populating at the same rate. I happened in China when they had their one child rule or whatever. They were locking it in, one child. They were holding everybody to it. And then when they realized that they had shocked the birth rate down so bad, they had to start encouraging people to have kids again because it was adversely affecting the population growth. So I hope we get it together. I think the only way around it, though, is to just find people that we really want to bang with like that. You know what I mean? And then it won't matter.
I don't know, Jay. I think that solution sounds a little simplistic because the reason why I asked S&M and to elaborate if she felt like that was one of the key reasons, because I think this has been trending for a very long time in ways that aren't even specific to relationships, right? So there's a school of thought that even the structure of relationships today were built from the society that they once existed in, right? So if you were like you went from hunting and gathering to being more sedentary, right? To owning land, for example. And then maybe at some point it makes sense to have a relationship and marriage because you want to be able to pass down land from one generation to the next. So I think there's a lot of ways that society changes over time that creates, these dynamics, right? To a certain extent. So now, for example, for the last 40 or 50 years, people have become more adept at working, making their own money, having access to some of the same resources. Is it equal? No. Is there still a lot of work to be done? Absolutely. But that type of access, if you will, gives people autonomy, right? The more education you tend to have, the more you put off having children, for example, right? Obviously, because you got to go to college, et cetera, et cetera. So you're going to have to, move things down a little bit. But I do think there's a certain level of awareness that people reach when they get to a certain financial place that says, I'm going to hold off on having kids, for example. And so you see certain trends that really are not so much about relationships that affect the fact that steadily that, has been moving back in terms of people are getting married later, people are having kids later, right? And some people are choosing not to have kids. My wife and I, we were married for a very long time and we only decided to have a kid 4 years ago, right? So we would have been those people who not only was about to choose not having a kid, but not even replacing ourselves, right? Because we only ended up having one. And you're seeing younger people making some of those same decisions. So, I mean, I get it because I feel like individually people should be able to make the best decision for themselves. But I do think it's something to raise the alarm about because I know we talked about this on several other pods where people getting married younger, it's almost like, listen, I guess we take for granted that we're going to live forever, but by the time we're 20 something, in previous cultures, people lived whole lives by the time they were 25. Like, I was joking about the whole frontal cortex lobe thing or whatever. But when you think about past generations of human beings existing before technology, like, kids were working at the age of 9 in freaking factories. I'm not saying that these things are good things. What I am saying is, though, we've come a long way, and I think maybe have overcorrected. Right. So we emphasize people longer. People are not mentally prepared. I know they say your stuff develops or whatever, but I'd almost push back on that, because I would believe there's science that says the more that you utilize your brain and pathways, you can actually affect how it matures, as opposed to just thinking that something that happens arbitrarily over time. Meaning that it's quite possible, and this is me, I'm not a doctor, I'm just talking my talk on off-season conversation, but it's completely possible that part of the reason why the brain doesn't develop a certain type of way up until this age is because we've slowed that shit the fuck down. You know what I'm saying? Like, we've slowed it down to a point that, like, because in previous iterations of us, we would have dealt with more sooner, right? But the more technology, the more easier life becomes, the less you have to deal with the realities of life, the less, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a generation that people saw death. How many of us have seen death at all, right? Only a few generations ago, somebody would have died and you'd have seen them in your home. Some people still experience that. So what I'm saying is, like, technology, the evolution of life in general has just made us more comfortable, easier for us to move around. But you mentioned tipping point, Jay. What happens when, like, there aren't enough jobs to go around? Because that's a tipping point too. Meaning that, like, if computers take over a lot of the function, when you had like Andrew Yang, I think, who was running for president, talking about like the minimum a salary, because he envisions a world where, what are human beings going to be doing other than fucking? You know what I'm saying? So maybe it'll retch back around to that. But no, in all seriousness, I do think this is ring the alarm time. Absolutely. Because if there's any 45% is a high number, right? And I think it just speaks to, like, I don't know, people losing faith, people losing grounding, people losing tradition, people losing the value of relationships. I think I get it. Maybe that's why it's so dope that we're doing this pod, because I think we can reimagine relationships differently. You know what I mean? Like, so yes, maybe you're not going to be married forever, but can you have a fruitful 15-year relationship where you had offspring and you both amicably parted and were able to co-parents and have a little nest egg to boot? Like, I don't know. Like, it's completely possible to do that and still be in a better place down the road. So I don't know. This is ringing the alarm time. And I'm surprised that more people aren't ringing the alarm, because this is a problem, especially for us, who believe in marriage and relationships and Black love and community, right? Because if we're all by ourselves, what fucking community are we building then? You know what I'm saying? Like, we're going to have a whole generation of grandmas and aunties living on their own in their own little spaces, in their own little pods, with no sense of community whatsoever. And I'll land with this, though, because I was also thinking about, like, family reunions. Like, those are dissipating. I think we might have talked about that maybe in like pre-pro. Like, there's a deterioration, y'all. And if y'all cool with that, that's cool. But I think this is one way it shows up. And yeah, we should ring the alarm for sure.